Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to thank the participants here in Milan and in Shanghai and Moscow who are connected with us. My name is Roberta Sorini. I am the marketing manager at Masottina. And next to me, I have Filippo Bartolotta, who will lead us in the tasting. Just a couple of words about the company. It was founded in 1946. It's a historical winery in Conigliano area, and the main distinctive feature is that we have 280 hectares of area under vines in Conigliano and in the plain of Prosecco DOC. We are here today to taste our wines from the Rive. The so-called Rive are our top quality gem, top quality line. Then Filippo will explain you what's their distinctive feature. And we have a somewhat special tasting because we talk about different vintages. It's going to be blind, and also this is something we don't do generally with Prosecco. That is to say, talking about aging and the important role of time in the glass. Now I leave the floor to Filippo, and then later on I'll add something else. So good morning. So as promised, I'll make a short introduction just to take you all on board. I know that here we have people who are professionals, journalists. I see quite a few friends who are back at our master classes. I'm really happy. But there are also people who are not professionals. And therefore, let me say this. Small introduction about the territory and Prosecco. Conegliano Valdobbiadene DOCG Superiore, because there is a lot of confusion, especially since we are also talking to our friends abroad, because in Moscow and St. Petersburg, some time ago I was for a tasting about presenting the Italian DOCG and DOCG wines. And while I was giving the lecture to the 100 best sommeliers in Russia, I said, in any case, in Russia, things are changing every month. And then news from ANSA sent saying that a new DOCG was officially approved. Then it's also tricky for professionals to understand what are the different contexts where many wines are made. For instance, take our wine in particular. Well, you know, we make more than 1/4 of worldwide wine. Italy plus France make up over 50% of wine production across the world. So we play a key role, and figures are quite outstanding. So, as to Prosecco, in 2009 brought about a revolution. What happened? What's in front of you when you're offered or you ask for a bottle of Prosecco? Is it all the same? No. Prosecco DOC is one thing. It's a designation, very large designation, 24,500 hectares that are 80% of them are in Veneto, and then we have another remaining portion, 19%, that is made in Friuli, down to the seaside. Then it's a very broad area where Prosecco DOC is made. And Prosecco DOC must be made with the variety that is Glera, even though previously the name was Prosecco, but so Glera, and it can be, and here we have a nice chart, so it can be made with 180 quintals per hectare in terms of yield. In other words, from your hectare, you can bring home up to 180 quintals of grapes. This is Prosecco DOC area. As you can tell, it's very broad. Then if you go to this large place and you go to the core of it, and so you narrow down and down and down, you get to the heart of this district that you see on top. And by the way, Prosecco DOC also so includes these 500 million bottles made every year. And then you also have the Prosecco DOC Treviso, which is the historical area of origin of Prosecco. So 24,000 hectares and 180 quintals of yield. Then we go up one level, we go to the DOCG, Prosecco Valdobbiadene Superiore DOCG. But before going in the upper part, the yellow part, we have the Asolo Prosecco DOCG, where they make 17 million bottles. And so at the tip of the pyramid, we have 8,000 hectares of Conegliano Valdobbiadene Superiore, 100 million bottles of Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG. Then we have Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore Rive DOCG. And these are just a few hundred hectares. And we have 43 rive. Later I will explain what they are. And then at the tip, with 1,200,000 bottles, with about 100 hectares, we have Cartize, which is the top Prosecco. So this is the pyramid of this appellation. What changes? The higher we go in the pyramid, the lower the yields per hectare. So from 180 quintals per hectare, the more we go down to 120 with Cartize and 135 with the others. And in total, in any case, Prosecco makes over 620 million bottles. And this happened under our eyes. Because if you look at wineries such as Masottina, if you take a trip there, and it's definitely worthwhile because you are in these beautiful hills with terraces without rocks. So the interesting thing about Valdobbiadene is that you have these terraces that are all grassed, so full of grass, as if they were painted by a man who doesn't change much the shape of the hills. And it's no coincidence that the DOCG has become the UNESCO heritage. And this is extremely important, not only because there's a benefit in terms of destination, in terms of as a tourist destination, but also because winemakers in these UNESCO site also have some responsibilities, which translate not only in protecting the landscape from the architectural point of view, there are nice villages kept beautifully, but also from the agronomic point of view and biodiversity-wise, the UNESCO site regulations require more attention being paid to sustainability. Here we have our Russian friends. Hello, Russian friends, and also Shanghai. So what was I saying? If you go to the Masottina winery that was built, by the way, by the family Del Bianco, Epifanio was the first in 1946, and then now we are at the third generation, but it took 40 years to make the Masottina winery because there were rules that forced the producer to increase the volumes of the cellar in proportion to the vineyards owned. So I can increase actually 2% a year. So it took 40 years to complete their 300 hectares in their winery. And what impressed me the most when I was there is that actually many wineries, Conegliano Valdobbiadene wineries, already in 2006 and 2007, had built a part of cellar underground where to put their casks and barricks. But then the revolution came because in 2009, in total, they were making 150 million bottles Prosecco. Now we are at 500 million. So you can imagine what a revolution they had. So this was this strong storm that overwhelmed everybody, including the investments made, for instance, to make white wine and red wine, because now they sell sparkling wines. So sparkling wines and made with the Sharma or Martinotti method. So the re-fermentation of the base wine is not in individual bottles, but in the autoclaves, in these large vats. This was a method invented by a Piedmontese, Martinotti, towards the end of the 1900s, that then was revisited and patented by French people, and called it Sharma. So Martinotti and Sharma are the same. So Prismus takes place in this big autoclave. So the wine is stilled, then starters are inoculated, and then second fermentation starts, and also prise de mousse takes place and pressure develops. What else can I say? Let me take you closer and closer to our tasting. So Roberta told you we would have a sort of dual vertical tasting because today we go backward in time, but we do so with two vineyards. So where are we? We are in Conegliano. We are in these incredible hills that I had a chance to visit with a Subaru rally with Federico, who is one of the three brothers. So, like the four-wheel drive Subaru, and up and down for the hills. And then we went to the vineyards. Despite I had a grandpa was making wine, and when I was little, I didn't like much. But I rediscovered later, so this year is 22 years of professional tasting, and saying that tasting grapes, despite it may sound trivial to all, I invite you to do that. Because if you taste the grapes, you understand everything. If you taste Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay or Glera, and if you taste Glera, elongated Glera or round Glera, because in the ampelographic legacy of this appellation, you know that the world of ampelography, so the science of vineyards, has recently discovered that there are two biotypes of Glera, the long one and the round one, that are somewhat different. Let me tell you quickly, because the long one is sweeter and the round one is more aromatic. Actually, the round one is most widespread, but then biotypes lead to many clones. And the beauty about going to the wineries isn't because, we keep putting our nose in the glasses, but it's important to go to see wineries because we have a lot of bottles of Prosecco, but they're not all the same, like in Bordeaux, Bourgogne, Montalcino or Langhe. So you have hundreds of wineries, but you have to go and check with your own eyes. So here we are already at the heart of our tasting. If you go taste the grapes in the vineyards on the eastern side, so today we're going to be here. Yeah. So what happened? So let me go here so that I can see. Up on top we have Cortina, 100 kilometers, so the old road of Alemania that takes us to Cortina on the Alps. And then right behind we have the pre-Alps that may look like mountains, but they are not. They tell you these are hills. But the pre-Alps have a key role as they stop the cold weather and protect this extraordinary valley. What is this? This is nothing but the movement of a glacier that comes from Fadalto up on top that moved 20,000 years ago, moved downward. And every time we have a morenic debris from glaciers, so it's a very young territory because these soils are Eocenic, Jurassic, 140, 60, 80 million years ago. But the soils formed by the debris of glaciers are all young because the glaciers pushes downward and outward and pushes the soil. So what you see here is a hill, so actually two hills, an amphitheater, and that, for instance, at the end of Lake Garda and Lake Iseo, then Lugano and Franciacorta, they have exactly the same geological formation. So you have a hill of 180, 200 meters above sea level with loose soils, said morenic soils. And we have two interesting things because we taste a riva from the 33 rive of Coldignano Valdobbiadene, and that is and it said RDO, Rive di Ogliano. This is the riva we are going to taste. That are 2 hectares on average in Ogliano. So the estate is 2 hectares. So the vineyard is 2 hectares. So we will taste the Riva di Ponente, that is a Brut, Prosecco Brut, with residual sugar between 0 and 6 grams per liter, so fairly dry. Then we will, so we are here. Then we go to Riva di Levante, and Ponente is west and Levante is east. And I say this for our Chinese and Russian friends. So Levante is east, Ponente is west. We will find differences together. Will we be able to distinguish them? I will ask the sommelier, and I invite the sommelier whom we who are in Shanghai and Moscow to start serving the first 2 wines. Let me interrupt you. In Shanghai right now, they have. We leave the floor to Sophie Shen, and she's going to lead the tasting in Shanghai. So bye bye, Sophie. Enjoy the tasting. And now we continue, and I'd like to say that we are in a territory that is beautiful because when you move closer to the Rive di Ogliano, by the way, Ogliano is up on top with the bell tower, and then suddenly what I have tried to describe about the glacier that pushed downward can even be found at the bottom of the valley with vineyards that have this sort or this, as if there is a spoon-shaped valley. And the funny thing about this, and there's more clay and more exposed to frost and hail, but what's interesting is that as you move up 150 meters, which in the world of wine, so it's nothing, but actually, when we start from the plain, it's enough to go high up 150 meters. And we find some highlands, like where Masottina is, where you feel and you perceive, because I'm persuaded that wine needs to be understood through its territory, because to its landscape. If you go up on top on the hills of Ogliano, you have continuous wind, and this wind comes mainly from Fadalto, from north, that makes it possible to have grapes in this area. So due to global warming, of course, hills that have a lot of wind from the Alps is very beneficial. And in particular here on the eastern slope, the Levante, we have the wind also from Venice and Trieste, which is called Bora in winter time, and that in summertime makes the area very fresh. And this makes it possible to have a relatively easy wine growing because there are fewer diseases and pests. And there are no wild boars in this area. And you know that wild boars are many. And there are no other ungulates, and then it's relatively easy to bring home fresh grapes. So when you taste the glera, what do you perceive? A very sweet grape with a very thin skin, very, very thin, and immediately the flavors, when you taste the grapes, have this wisteria, peach, almond flower. So the primary aromas are very intense and stand out very clearly and are easy to identify. So you will serve two wines. So we have wine number 1 and wine number 6. So let's start our tasting. Number 1, on the nose, fresh, mature nectarine peach. But it's not only that, because immediately there is something that tells us, but I perceive something that is a bit floral and this is the orange blossom, and you can. There is also an almond, but also marzipan, a marzipan touch. But almond is stronger. Then in wine number 6, well. Together with the notes of white fruit and white flowers, there is also immediately so think of your memory, because there is your memory that identifies something. And for me, my memory made me identify these notes of sage, dried herbs, and also pine tree resin. So there is a more balsamic and mineral note that stands out in wine number 6. Then, by the way, this let me do the palate. Let me take a sip. Okay, nice. So what do we have immediately? We have at the beginning, we have a very voluminous, generous note of mousse, of foam, generous foam that stands out for its crispiness, because the finish is tangerine. So on the palate, you have a sort of layer, a citric layer that is reminiscent of lemon and lemon zest, lemon peel. And the nice thing about Oliano is this sensation of benzenoids, aromatic hydrocarbons, that give more spicy notes compared to wines from other areas of the Prosecco district. And this stands out quite clearly. But we have this fresh acidity most of all. Now our palate is clean, despite there is some residual sugar that is typically part of Prosecco. Let's taste number 6 now. Here we are. So, number 6. In number 6, can you perceive So if you now bend your head, there is this salivation starting because, sometimes or often, or all too often, when we taste Prosecco, which is, of course, the wine of parties, we forget that we are also in the entertaining industry. So sometimes I go to taste Prosecco and I say, well, come with me. And some people tell me, no, not Prosecco. Oh, no, Prosecco. I'm going to have a vertical of Prosecco. They laugh. Oh, you go for a vertical of Prosecco. Come on. And when we don't talk about the great mythical wines, if we taste something that is, because, Prosecco is a more commercial wine, is drunk everywhere. Even when, if you go to Lecce and you ask for a Prosecco, they tell you they give you Prosecco, but it's not Prosecco. What I mean, you have to pay attention when you taste the wines, and you have to pay respect for the work of people who have set up a winery like this one, these farmers, these winemakers that are very respectful of their territory. For instance, they don't use irrigation, and in 1277 there are some edicts. I don't know if they are edicts, but in any case, these laws that said that water could not be used for vineyards, that that you would end in prison if you stole grapes from the neighbor. Why am I saying this? Well, because actually these areas, from the historical point of view, have been been quite important for wine for quite some time. Let me go back to wine number 6. So, there is in 6, there is a lot of acidity. Do you think it's sweeter or less sweet than number 1? What do you think? Sweeter, less sweet? Some say yes, some say no. And I always ask this question, and probably it's a 50-50 vote. Let's say that technically speaking, it has more residual sugar as it's an extra brut, and it has 12 grams per liter. But at the beginning, we perceive this sweetness, but in the finish, this wine is much more reactive and vertical than wine number 1, because acidity and salivation created on our palate was much more citric too. And also there is a note that was not in 1, but is in 6, that is a touch of sapidity that was not in the first one, that was softer, more round, more fruity, and maybe even simpler, we may say. Whereas in number 6, it's less simple, because Prosecco has this peach note, and it's very easy to drink it, but you have to pay attention. With these wines, I had some fun with some colleagues in a restaurant one day, in a starred restaurant in Milan called Alchimia, to taste. We had a dinner with from starters to dessert, only for Prosecco, and we also had lamb, dish with lamb. And how is it possible to pair this with Prosecco? Well, you have to do in such a way that it doesn't overpower on the wine, but it was quite surprising. Okay, let's continue. Do you have the other wines? I think so. Okay. Perhaps I can ask my sommeliers also to serve the last 2 wines as well. So, wine number 2. So, wine number 2 has notes of fruit, much more ripened. So, the peach becomes very yellow at the end of the season, very ripened. And together with peach, we also have a note almost boisé, almost vanilla, almost oaky, even though there's no oak at all here. But in Oliano, Glera stands out also with these aromatic hydrocarbons that may make you think of a vanilla stick. That is very interesting. And also some sage. What's the number? Number 3. That's number 3. And so more spicy than number 1. So if you go back to 1, it's easy. Number 1 is all around wisteria. So, wisteria. Okay, thank you. And going from one to the other. So if we reset our nose, we can see the difference. So here in the first, we have flowers, very intense, and now even more intense that area. Whereas in number 2, it's ripened fruits, vanilla, white chocolate. Soft, creamy. So we start to have notes of croissant and apricot jam. So citric, it's as if the apricot jam was kind of sprinkled with some lemon drops. It's as if we put some lemon drops on this apricot jam. So ripened fruit, but also this citric balanced, which is very citric note that is very well balanced. And this wine has 7 grams per liter of acidity, and so that's quite a remarkable acidity. And generally, in Val d'Obbiadene, they use this approach because of the distinctive character of Glera. And now, wine number 5. Oh, what happens here? Well, here we have this note that is, I was talking about aromatic hydrocarbons, but it's really like oil. You know the marker you use to underline your books? We have a floral note, and that is of peat, like the peat that is used for whiskey, but it's not oxidative. So it's a whiff of minerality, of gunflint, very interesting. The fruit is more Williams pear. And there is also a balsamic note again. We have this sort of, the tea tree oil or propolis. So when we talk about these nuances, they are just small highlights, and then they are mixed in our nose. As you know, our nose can perceive hundreds of aromas, but then because, of course, these aromas come from the variety, fermentation, aging. So tertiary aromas means that monomeres become polymers, and the aromatic chains were simple, so fruity, become more complex. So they increase up to the point in which there is an ascending curve, and then the curve goes down. And so in the end, all wines become vinegar, and that's the end of the curve. But it depends on their aging potential, of course. But one thing first. I just want you to underline the almond. Almond is always there. In one way or another, the flower, the fruit, or marzipan, always almond. There's always almond in Ogliano. And again, the wine number 5, compared to number 2, is more juicy, there's more sweetness, more acidity and salinity. So it's a deeper wine compared to the other one, even though in this case it's more with notes of ripened fruit. compared to the other. So it's pears, like a slice of pear, and that is a bit oxidated pear. Let's look at the last two wines. Let me check my watch. So it's 12:40 because I would like to have some time for question and answers. Then the last two wines. So you look at the wines, and of course they are the older. You can tell from the color. So we started off from the younger, and then we are moving towards the older wines, the more aged wines. And there are some similarities, but also some differences, which are quite evident. So here, I have to confess that these 2014, oh no, my God. Oh no, I told you the year, I told you the vintage. That was unintended. I'm sorry. The last two were 2014. I'm sorry. But in a vertical tasting at Masottina, we went back until 2010. 2014 are more intense, have a very intense color. Like 2010 was much younger and fresher than 14, but 14 had great aromas. So put your nose inside inside sample number 3. And this is a great mixture. I wanted Federico Gordini to taste this glass because, it's as if it's a sort of sauterne, like a late vintage wine, late harvest wine, like that is attacked by the noble rot, the pourriture noble. And then when the skin protects itself from the noble rot, develops some balsamic substances, a bit mentholated, menthol, like candied citrus fruit, candied citron, and saffron. There's a lot of saffron here. And it's so all related to this citron zest. And but what stands out here is more the balsamic nuance. So this nose is definitely very seductive, very intriguing, because it doesn't have any oxidative or oxidated notes at all, but it's a very separate story because I tasted 10, 11, 12, 13. And by the way, this bottle is wonderful, Filippo. This one is definitely gorgeous. Well, I drink it, I don't spit it. So with this extraordinary sapidity, and now I perceive in the mouth gentian, anise, but also fruity notes. We start having, can't find the I would say mango, and there are very nice tropical notes, and also loquat. And then the mousse, the bubbles, are no longer very exuberant, but didn't disappear. So these are very fine bubbles. They haven't disappeared at all. So this is a wine. This is a wine that has developed some tertiary notes without losing its freshness. And so the bubbles become a little weaker because of course, with the Metodo Classico, the bubbles last longer. But this 2014 is more, let's say, a still wine than a sparkling wine to a point. Number 4. Number 4 is similar but less intense. So this saffron, candied citron, it's a little less. So it's a little less pronounced. It reminds me more of popcorns, of of caramel, or when you make a candies with brown sugar. And also these very elegant candied notes. It's a bit more mineral, and also candy floss or cotton candy. Here on my right-hand side, there's more sugar because these wines on average are at 12 grams per liter of sugar, but acidity is more pronounced. But there's more because it's the depth of these wines that matter and that stands out most. Here, it's more multifaceted. Of course, here we have this 2014, which is out of the blues, that suddenly strikes you. And now the more we go on, the fresher it becomes, because for 2014, so number 4, is much less spicy. But now I would like to unveil the wines. We said we have a double vertical, the Rivedogliano Ponento and Rivedogliano Levante, so east and west. So we had a Brut, we have a Brut and an extra Brut. But before unveiling the wines, I'm curious to hear, also from Moscow and from Shanghai, but also from you in Milan, I'd like to know, first of all, I'd like to know from you what you think about these wines, and if there was anything surprising that you found. And especially, do you think there are differences between the two sides, Levante and Ponente? I think you've understood what I was doing, right? Because what did I do? We did 20. This is 2020 with 1 and 6. Then 2017 with 2 and 5. And then 2014 with 3 and 4. So we had a tasting of... so this is Rivedogliano Ponente, so West 2020. Ponente is West. Let me put them here so that you can see them well. So Ponente again 2017, then Rivedogliano Ponente 2014. Here they are on this side. So here we have these Ponente wines, these Western wines. And this is 14. And you know that most Ponente are not vintage wines, and so they select the grapes of the vintage. And then there is a percentage of these wines that are made... thank you for your support. Made with from the free-run juice. So the grapes are brought and squeezed. They don't touch it, and so gravity presses the grapes, and you have this first free-run juice. The yield is very low. And before bottling, and be careful, this is a detail which is very important for Prosecco. So they don't bottle immediately. They bottle after December. So wine is kept in the autoclave for 3-4 months. And then what have we noticed? Well, we've noticed, I guess, that first of all, this is a world of personal taste. And so I'm curious to know what you think, of course. But certainly, there are some saline notes that I perceived on the eastern Riva Levante, because probably of two main reasons. Number one is that here we are east. So the Bora wind gets immediately here, and so dries and concentrates the grapes. But most of all, these are 40-year-old vines, beautiful vineyards. So the trunks of these vines are huge. And also when I tasted the grapes in the vineyards, yes, there are also the pictures. So when I tasted the grapes, I could immediately say they are complex. So this is the vineyard. So it looks flatter than what it is. It's more steep, actually. So when you taste these grapes, the skin was pretty thick. Yes, we can keep this picture because it shows you the steepness. And also there's a forest all around. Yes, 50% of the DOCG is not under vine because there are a lot of olive trees, because in these morenic soils there are also these olive trees that grow very well. And in particular, the old vines are beautiful because the old vines, the old vineyards are extremely important. Also in this case, and by the way, these vineyards are not only old, but actually there is a population of clones of Glera that are very multifaceted. So if you look at the shape of the bunches and the berries, they are very diverse. And I think that this increases the complexity of the wines from Levante, from East. Now we have on West, Ponente, these vineyards are only 10-year-old, not 40, just 10. But the soil is harder, also more compact. And the last difference, but is residual sugar. So it's higher in extra brut, in Levante, in Eastern wines. So I'm done because we were given a certain timeline. But Shanghai, Moscow, Milano, what do you think? Tell me. So let's start a discussion. First of all, thank you for your attention, because I've seen that you were all very paying a lot of attention. So what do you think? Tell me, what did you like most? What surprised you? What seemed most interesting? Tell me. East, West, Levante, Ponente?
Okay. Sì. Sì, allora, la 14 è una cosa interessante perché...
So 2014 is interesting because in viticulture this is called quarta foglia, fourth leaf. And the fourth leaf is as if it means a 4-year vineyard. It means it gives a sort of preview of what it can give in 20-25 years. And so probably there was these nuances that you identified because of this. And also, I think that tasting these wines is more difficult because diversities are more subtle. Differences are more subtle here. Because if you have a vertical tasting of Sangiovese or Nebbiolo, it's much more evident. Differences stand out more evidently. Here, differences are more blurred. And also, then the residual sugar, to some extent, makes it difficult to distinguish and differentiate aromas, because sometimes sugar is a bit overpowering, which is in the character of Prosecco. So Prosecco tells you, don't think too much, uncork the bottle, crack it open and drink. Well, you know, it's not a problem for me to say that Nebbiolo, it's as if they switch on a brain scan and you keep perceiving many aromas. Barbera doesn't do that, not even the greatest Barbera at all. So it's not done to appeal to that part of our brain. The same for Pinot Nero. Pinot Nero is less intellectual and more sensual. And also Prosecco is more about immediacy, so immediate flavors. And it's hard to identify the differences because they're very blurred. Which one did you like most? We are sorry, but the lady is not using the microphone, so we cannot translate questions. From Shanghai. So it's more of a technical question, so I don't know whether Filippo or Roberta is going to answer. How is the strategy of the company for China? Well, we have our export manager here. So why a vertical tasting of Prosecco? Well, I just wanted to say that before, but there are a few people who tasted old vintages of Prosecco, so old Proseccos, aged Prosecco. This is strategic for us, of course, and we do that because we want to make people understand that also Prosecco is first and foremost a wine, and if it's made in a certain way, so it's well made, it can give you a lot of satisfaction. Also, if you go back in time. So it's not that we will just sell aged Prosecco. We don't want to do that. But the idea is to make people understand that actually when Prosecco is well made with attention, when time is devoted to the vineyard, to the cellar and to the tasting, then you can have great surprises. And by the way, in Italy, we also started a project with ambassadors in top restaurants who include this Prosecco, some old vintages, but just as a curiosity. So not to sell aged Prosecco, but it's just to make people understand that Prosecco, if well made, can give you a lot of satisfaction. And Filippo said that the Levante vineyards are old. The ones in Ponente are not old, but we want them to become old, of course. And so we selected the right clones, the right exposure to make it become old. And think in terms of figures. 24,500 hectares, 245. So I mean Ogliano, the Rive, or actually the Rive of Conegliano, Valdobbiadene and Superiore DOCG are 250 hectares, so 1% of the entire area. So this is 3 hectares and 2 hectares, so very tiny plots. So very small. Of course, Prosecco will remain just a wine to drink in parties, convivial, pleasant. But with this tasting, we want to say that we can do this, and also so you can enjoy it young, but also aged. Any other considerations or comments? Maybe Tiziana? Can you say more about this territory? Well, certainly the territory has an impact on these wines. But Ogliano, which is the area where the company or the winery and the family invested, is special because, as we've seen earlier, is a Roman kind of amphitheater made by this glacier. And therefore, the winds coming from the north are constant and ever present. I remember when I joined last year, Federico Dal Bianco told me, well, put a sweater, it's cold. And actually it's cold, especially at night. Cold maybe not, but cool. and this helps us. But also the soil helps us too. Since this is a morenic soil, the roots of the vine go find the water down in the water table, and this is pretty unique. So this is why this is one of our 43 river. And by the way, I forgot to say something at the beginning when I was talking about the terroir. So I forgot to say that Ogliano is very well known for having more temperature differences between daytime and nighttime. In daytime, it's pretty warm, but at nighttime, it's cold. And therefore, these temperature differences allow the vine to breathe during the night because it's cooler. And this is very good for winemaking. So the grapes with these temperature differences also develops nicer aromas. Having said that, a lot has been done. I mean, Italian winemakers have learned a lot from the warm years. So now they know what to do. They wait, they remove less leaves, so they thin the vineyards less, they keep a nice canopy. And so Ogliano, of all the areas, is the one that probably has this significant temperature difference. I see there are more questions, right? Yes, from Moscow, they are asking the difference in terms of food pairing between young years and more aged wines. Well, I would say that the young Prosecco, the young vintages, are the reasons why you buy Prosecco. So you buy Prosecco because it's fruity, it's floral, generous, and served at the right temperature. You have to serve them cool. So with this sapid note, you can drink them very simply, with a lot of simplicity, and so they are great for aperitifs, which small finger food. That's perfect. Then when they are more aged, maybe this could be raw fish or fish. Then for more aged Prosecco, we can have more complex dishes, and also blue cheeses. This is great fun with a blue cheese. It could work well. And also think of polenta with some cheese or mushrooms. So I find it very gastronomic. I thought you said canestrelli, the cookies. Well, Venice is very close.
Ora è il periodo dei canestrelli che sono delle scallops.
Then the canestrelli are like cookie-shaped scallops. Small scallops, so the shells, and they are beautiful canestrelli. Yes, these scallops are perfect. Shanghai? Yes, we have one last question from Shanghai. Many are surprised that we are drinking 2014 Prosecco. Does it happen often in Italy or not? No. There are only few wineries, historical wineries, that keep these wines and propose these wines and have in their cellars a nice storage of these wines. This was just something that we decided to do with Del Bianco. So the Del Bianco family likes to do that because, vertical tastings are a sort of exercise to understand the winery, to understand the potential, the opportunities of these winery. This is very rare. This is something that a sommelier can propose, a skilled sommelier with good knowledge, with good authoritativeness and self-confident sommelier, and says, can I have you taste something unusual tonight? And at that point, it would be nice, for instance, to be a bit more courageous and open the mind, because we say, no, I don't want Prosecco. No, if you drink this blind, well, that's incredible. incredibly good. And actually, we did that at Alchimia restaurant, where there is a wonderful chef, a wonderful sommelier that I fully trust. I've always asked him to choose the wine for me because he's very reliable. Let me just add a couple of things before also leaving the floor to Federico. So thank you all for your attention, and I'd like to thank my team, my colleagues who've supported me so much during the week. And I moved them here and there because we had many events all over Milan. I don't see Giulia, probably she's behind me, my assistant, who was very, very precious, and my Teresa from the press office. That wouldn't be possible without her. Of course, I want to thank you for joining us and for sharing these stories with our winery, and to have bet on us with this challenging tasting. I did that with great pleasure. And now I'll leave the floor to our host. Well, first of all, thank you for this gorgeous tasting, wonderful tasting. We discussed a lot about Prosecco over these last few days, also with Roberta in our forums, in our conferences. And probably, since we are connected with these two extraordinary towns, and I'd like to thank all the participants in Moscow and Shanghai, because for us it's very important to communicate this culture and do that with the most important appellation we have volume-wise, because Prosecco is an ambassador of Italy across the world. And therefore, talking about the culture of Prosecco, the pairings, and also the different types of Prosecco styles that come from this large designation is fundamental, because Prosecco is a great Italian ambassador. And Masottina is a winery that invested a lot to make a top quality Prosecco, both in the DOCG and in the DOC. And this is a distinctive mark of this winery. So we have to learn, and I can say that the questions are very relevant. Questions you made, also the difference between the various wineries. And I invite you, Filippo said that too, visit Masottina, come visit Masottina, because it's an extraordinary place. The buildings, the equipment, the technologies are excellent, and it's worthwhile a trip and a visit. And I hope that our friends in Shanghai and Moscow will come back to Italy soon. We all wait for you here at Milano Wine Week next year in October so that you can enjoy Milan, but also these nice territories that are extraordinary. And I'd like to profit from this occasion to thank our partners, Business Strategists in Shanghai and ICE in Moscow, that did a great job for our event. And of course, I thank to a dear friend who has been the most important face of Milano Wine Week this year, Filippo Bartolotta, an excellent wine writer, journalist, who is certainly a person we like a lot, and he is a game changer, because we are truly changing the way of communicating wine, and you are one of the main protagonists in this. Thank you all, and a round of applause to Filippo, please, because he deserves that. And also thanks to the sommelier who were perfect. And so this is the last day of Milano Wine Week, and I would like to thank you all. Today, everything is it's all sold out. Milano Wine Week with plenty of record numbers, and so we wait for you next year to toast together and tell wonderful things like this one. So long live Milano Wine Week.